Have you ever wondered what the air you're breathing right now and maybe that cup of coffee on your desk have in common? Well, today we're diving into a core concept from chemistry that's literally all around us: solutions. And trust me, getting a handle on this is going to change how you see the world. I know, it sounds like the beginning of a really weird joke, right? But stick with me here. By the end of this explainer, the answer is going to feel so obvious, and it's going to give you a whole new perspective on things at a molecular level. So the answer to that little riddle? They're both solutions, but what does that actually mean? To really get it, we've got to first understand what a solution is at its most basic level, and it all boils down to this idea of a homogeneous mixture. Okay, so what is a solution? It's a homogeneous mixture. Now, that word homogeneous is the absolute key here. It just means that the mix is perfectly uniform all the way through. Think about stirring salt into water. Once it's all dissolved, you could take a drop from the very top or a drop from the very bottom, and they would taste exactly the same. That's a solution. Now, every single solution out there, it doesn't matter what it is made of two parts. You can kind of think of them as the two main players on a team. So let's meet them. And here's our duo, the solute and the solvent. And telling them apart is actually super simple. The solvent is just the part you have more of, the larger quantity. And the solute, that's the stuff you have less of. So in our saltwater example, water is the solvent and the salt is the solute. That's it. Now, here's a really simple rule that's incredibly powerful. And hey, if you're studying for an exam like the CUET, you're going to want to write this down. The final physical state of a solution, whether it's a solid, a liquid, or a gas, is always decided by the state of the solvent. So if your solvent is a liquid, your solution is going to be a liquid. Simple as that. So if we use that one rule, we can actually classify every solution into one of three big categories, all based on what state the solvent is in. It makes everything so much easier to organize in your head. And this table just lays it all out for us. If your solvent is a gas, you get a gaseous solution. Think of the air around us. If the solvent is a liquid, you get a liquid solution, like our good old friend salt water. And if your solvent is a solid, you get a solid solution, like brass. Pretty cool, right? Now let's dig into some more examples. All right, so we've got the big picture view. Now let's zoom in a bit and look at some real, everyday examples you can find in each of these categories, starting with the gaseous ones. So in gaseous solutions, the solvent is always, you guessed it, a gas. You can have a gas dissolved in another gas, which is exactly what air is. It's mostly oxygen dissolved in nitrogen. But you can also have a liquid in a gas, or even a solid that turns into a vapor and dissolves in a gas, like camphor. But really, that gas in gas example, air, that's the classic one to remember. Okay, quick heads up. Pay close attention to this next part. The source material makes it really clear that liquid solutions aren't just the kind we run into most often in our daily lives, they also tend to pop up the most on exams. So let's take a closer look. And here are the three main types of liquid solutions. You can have a gas dissolved in a liquid, like the oxygen in water that fish need to breathe. You can mix a liquid into a liquid, like alcohol and water. And of course, the one we're all super familiar with, a solid dissolved in a liquid, like sugar in your tea or coffee. They're literally everywhere. And finally, we get to solid solutions, where the solvent is a solid. You can actually have a gas dissolve into a solid or a liquid into a solid, like mercury and sodium, which makes an amalgam. And then you have a solid dissolved in another solid, which is how we get really important materials, like all the metal alloys we use. And you know what? Here's a great little mental shortcut. If you ever hear the word alloy, like brass, bronze, steel, you can be 100% sure that you're talking about a solid in solid solution. It's just a fantastic tip to keep in your back pocket. Okay, so we've seen all the different types now, but what are the universal rules that make something a solution? Like, how is dissolving salt in water different from just, dumping a scoop of sand in water? And this slide lays out that difference perfectly. See, a real solution is homogeneous. The little particles are so tiny and so well mixed that you can't see them, they'll never settle to the bottom, and you can't just filter them out. A suspension, though, like muddy water, is the total opposite. It's not uniform, you can see the bits floating around, they'll totally settle out if you wait, and yeah, you can filter them. Getting this difference is absolutely crucial. So, just to wrap up the main ideas, here are the four big examples you'll want to lock into your brain. Air is gas and gas. Salt water is solid and liquid. Alcohol and water is liquid and liquid. And brass is solid and solid. If you can remember these four, you've really nailed the basics. And that pretty much brings us to the end. I mean, from the very air we're breathing to the oceans that keep our planet stable, solutions are just fundamental to how everything works. So I'll just leave you with this to think about. Now that you know how to spot them everywhere, what do you think is the most important solution in your life? Thanks for joining me.